Back now on the Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics, and ready to dive into everything that the 119th Congress will be talking about and working on. And talking about all this, an all-star panel. Troy Mayor Ethan Baker, a Republican who's a regular on the Pulse. You also know former State Representative Sherry Gate-Agnago, who's also a regular, and Oakland University. It's a Friday. It just takes time. The words take time. The brain doesn't want to connect. Oakland University political science professor Dave Dulio, a man who doesn't need the introduction, but is here with us here today. Thank you all for joining us here on the Pulse today. Better luck than me for you to speak here today, but let's do this. Let's begin with the big news of the week. I want to begin with you, Mayor Baker. You saw the events that unfolded in New Orleans. So many lawmakers are saying they're worried about big events, small events. Just as an American, as a leader in our community, your thoughts on what you saw?
Well, first of all, my heart goes out to everybody in New Orleans. I know you have family there. I know Mayor Cantrell really well, and I think she's done a fantastic job of representing the people of her city through really an act of terror and a tragedy. It's every mayor's worst nightmare to get a call that something like this has happened, and I just know there's so many people impacted right now that are hurting, and it makes us all, rightfully on edge a little bit about what security measures we have in place and what we can do to make sure our citizens stay safe. And, the reality is we can only do so much. Nobody can do everything perfectly. As you can see, there's always going to people can find a way to do bad things. Our
unscientific poll indicated from everyone who voted, Sherry, that, 80% of the people who were polled on our poll said, hey, I'm not changing anything. Here in America, here in Detroit, here in New Orleans, wherever you are, we do what we do, and no one gets to win. The terrorists don't get to win. We have to do what we do. That didn't surprise you, did it?
No, it didn't surprise me, but in some ways, and I have to give my condolences to the family as well, and in all of New Orleans that are experiencing and reeling from this tragedy. But it kind of saddens me. And the reason I say that is we have to move forward with our lives, but sometimes I think we become desensitized to these acts of terror, and I don't want us to forget what this is, what is happening, and then take away the priority to address it in a meaningful way, addressing the mental health issue as well as the security issue. And that's important because it can happen anywhere, anytime, any city, God forbid.
And Dave, I don't want to take away the sense of community and warmth that you have for America, but from a political science point of view, when a tragedy happens, we know right away politicians take a side and start talking about what needs to happen. We saw that with this tragedy as well.
We sure do. And first, let me say I co-sign all the comments from my colleagues here. I think it's just the politics that we're in right now, where it seems to be even something that is not divisive, right? Where we're all concerned about the people of New Orleans. We're all concerned about the families. Nobody wants to see this happen, yet people try to score political points from it. And I think that that's something that we shouldn't reward when we see that happen on social media, right? If people are posting about that, I think American citizens should call that out, right? And say, look, that's not how we handle this stuff.
No, we all have a voice, and the voice that we have that we take so much pride in, so much of that lies in Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. If you see something that's objectionable, say something to make sure that you stop that. My family, all my in-laws, we checked on them, but my nieces and nephews are all home from college, and they were walking around near the French Quarter, and it just is such a shocking thing for all of us.
Area.
It is, but let's move forward and talk about something that is far more trivial and less important in so many ways when you talk about the loss of 14 lives. But life, and as we know it, is going to change politically with the 119th Congress that, of course, is taking shape. Let's talk about Speaker Mike Johnson. What a difference, Dave Dulio. We saw with McCarthy, it took way longer than that, in 15 different votes. Were you surprised that they were able to kind of figure this out as quickly as they did?
No, I think, while we have politicians and elected officials who may try to serve some self-interest these days, even in the topic that we just covered, right? I think Republicans learned their lesson from the McCarthy mistake. And they wanted to show a little resistance to Speaker Johnson. Certainly some of those on the right, like Representative Roy and Representative Massey, who did vote against Speaker Johnson. But they proved their point, they showed their power, and now they were just ready to get on and get it over with and move on.
And that's exactly what they did, to not make a splash, not make headlines, to introduce this Congress in a way that shows America that they can get work done, because that's an important message. Sherry, though, we know that one of the big reasons that Speaker Johnson, there was such an umbrage to the work that he had done is because he had worked so closely with Democrats to prevent a government shutdown, and some of the funding in those bills, perhaps questionable to some Republicans. But does that still shake you a little bit to know that someone who simply was trying to work with the other party was nudged and pushed, and someone tried to push him down because of that?
Well, so I expect that. I mean, we have such a huge partisan divide sometimes to our own demise as citizens in this country. And I think it's incumbent upon all of those who are elected to realize, like Leader Hakeem Jeffries pointed out today, there is a time to campaign, and now there's a time to govern, and it's time to govern. It's interesting, though, that we saw real time how the sausages are made. And so two Congress members had to go out, have a conversation, make a phone call, and whether you like President Trump or not, what we saw today is a part of leadership. And if you think back of the closure of the legislative session in Michigan, we could have used some of that leadership.
You're saying leadership from President-elect Trump.
Absolutely.
To actually push some lawmakers into the right place.
Absolutely. Like, look, it's not time to play games. Let's get this done. If you mess up the timeline, you're going to mess up my swearing in. So let's get it together. I don't know what they were promised.
That might have been the key.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, Dave, because we know, Sherry, Dave, and Ethan, that if a speaker is not present, you cannot certify the votes. And of course, his inauguration would have taken place, and there wouldn't have been a certification until they had a speaker. Ethan, a little bit of Mayor Baker. You're a Republican. We should point out that he's in a nonpartisan role as in the capacity of being mayor of New Orleans. Again, I need coffee. Mayor of Troy. But when you talk a little bit about what Trump's influence has been here, it's pretty incredible. But the political calculus around falling in line with what Trump wants is an important one to keep in mind. People have to please President Trump if they want to win midterms in the future, right?
I think so, although often it doesn't work. Right? He's tried in other times and it's not actually worked out. That he hasn't gotten what he wanted. But I'm thankful as a Republican that this did work out, because we couldn't take a McCarthy mistake again. It would have been a catastrophe going in with all three branches essentially controlled by Republicans now. And so, yeah, I think you want to please President Trump to a certain extent. You want to give him the benefit of the doubt, no matter what kind of Republican you are, because you want to be on the right side of, trying to move things forward for your constituents. And yeah, you don't want to get primaried in a midterm. Even if you likely could win, you're going to spend a ton of money in a primary that you don't want to spend. You're going to get beat up unnecessarily. And it's just not worth it. But yeah, I'm really thankful that it worked out.
When you see what happened, there was kind of two schools of Republicans: the old school Republicans, the MAGA Republicans. President Trump wins. Now we have basically the party of Donald Trump. But within that party, it seems like there are still some, as we've seen here, that are more extreme than even Trump.
Factions within political parties are nothing new, right? We've seen this over history, and we've even seen it recently here in Michigan.
Yes.
I think there's no doubt about that on both sides of the aisle.
Absolutely.
And what is making them even more important now is the era of thin majorities that we live in. And Michigan Democrats found that out at the end of last session, as you pointed out, right? They couldn't get their act together, and they missed a huge opportunity.
Huge.
So
especially for the African-American community.
Absolutely, certainly. And I think that Republicans need to temper their expectations, because this is going to be a tough 2 years with a very, very thin majority in the U.S. House, a non-filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. Senator Thune is committed to keeping it. Wouldn't Republicans like it if Democrats had killed it last time around, right? So it's this thin majority in both chambers, and in Washington and here in Michigan that we're going to see, that is going to make it really tough to be effective in that governing period.
Or it's going to force a level of collaboration where we can get things done.
Yeah.
And I have real confidence in Hakeem Jeffries and just their speeches today. Maybe this is the honeymoon.
Sure.
But
It's early.
It is the honeymoon, Sherry. I just tell you, but that's okay.
We have about 30 seconds left. Let's talk about the Democrats, because, by the way, for us to pretend that there's some kind of a rift only within the Republican Party is ridiculous. We had a disaster of a campaign from the Kamala Harris camp. Everyone thought it would be one thing. It turned out to be something very different. Let's start with you, Sherry, and go through for about 10 seconds a pop the work that Democrats have to do lying ahead.
They have to start listening to the people, and the messaging has been off for quite some time, and we're not a monolithic party. The African American community messaging, it never resonate. The constant talking about abortion, not addressing the issues of the economy, that's what lost the election.
Ethan, Mayor Ethan Baker, your thoughts on the Democratic Party and what they have to learn moving forward?
Oh, I think Sherry's exactly right. I mean, everybody is very different. We're not all one monolithic people or group of people, so you got to look at everybody. You can't take people for granted, and I think that's what's happened.
No doubt about it. I'll just say one thing real quick, is that find places where you can agree and start from there.
20,000 Detroiters decided to vote for Donald Trump. Dearborn and Dearborn Heights, and large numbers did the same. And today on TV, Sherry Gadegnago said Donald Trump showed excellent leadership. So 2025 is shaping up to be very effective. And speaking of Congress, there's a move the Surgeon General wants them to make involving booze, the new warning label he wants to see on the bottle. That's next on The Pulse, and we thank our guests for joining us here tonight.